Hey, what are the Vegas odds I do the intro right?
Low. Plus 1,000.
Let's see what I've got in the tank today. Starting off in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for you Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, there, I did it. I'm proud.
Does it count if you run the lap immediately after?
No. Does not matter. This is absolutely a situation of, look, he was able to get up off of the field after getting hurt. And
right, you're giving the thumbs up, yeah.
Yep, this is me giving the thumbs up as I'm getting carted off of the field. I did the intro. I am proud.
Why don't you tell the listeners at home why you could conceivably be proud of doing the intro?
I am higher than a Georgia pine right now. I am higher than Dusty O'Connell right now.
Right, but your high is legal, but also not just on life.
Yes. So 2 weeks ago, I lost the ability to walk and stand and be kind of functional. I've been in the hospital for the last 2 weeks as we try to figure out what's wrong with my leg, what's wrong with my back, and we had a procedure done here about 3 or 4 days ago. I'm currently at a rehab hospital, pumped full of the best drugs they can possibly provide me, which is also to say there may be cursing in this episode. I'm not editing it out.
Oh, good.
So
does that mean I can curse too?
I mean, try not to, but at the same time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'll try.
Do what you can. So I've been in the hospital literally for the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks today is when I went in at 5:30 in the morning when I got an ambulance ride in a blizzard a mile to the hospital. So it's been fun. Today was the best day I've had since this whole thing started, so I'm hopeful that I will be slightly on the mend. It's also why I have a bit of like a drawl or a southern accent. I'm on all the good drugs right now. If you got one of your favorites in here, it's probably in that cocktail. I even have gabapentin, which when I took it before, when I'd walk into rooms, like if I went into the bathroom, I'd forget why I went into said bathroom. Be like,
Gab is pretty crazy.
Am I doing the laundry right now? Am I like, do I need to shave? Why did I walk in here? Okay. I'm sitting down. I get it. So yeah, it's the most ridiculous like pairing of stuff. So I'm going to try to push through this. Normally this would be an episode where we would ignore. We would not talk about anything going on with the Vikings. We're not even labeling this episode 600. We're doing a mini episode so we can talk about the two major things that have happened. We're going to talk about Kwesi being fired and Brian Flores returning.
Wait, what?
You didn't hear? How am I the one breaking this news to you? I feel
I was on a plane the whole day yesterday. You said emergency episode, and I was like, yeah, Senior Bowl. That makes sense.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Senior Bowl. It'll be great. I'm sure that Senior Bowl happened, and that's about as much information as I can provide. For the record, I did pitch doing this show at 1:30 in the afternoon today when I was absolutely like peaking on the medicine I was taking. And Arif shot it down. So I just want you to know.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of like writing my. So spoiler. I actually did know that Kwesi got fired.
Oh.
Yeah, I know this comes as a shock, a betrayal to some of you who believe in the fidelity of every word I say on the show. But no, I was in the middle of writing my like Kwesi postmortem, and I was like, nope. It had nothing to do with whether or not James would have been capable of recording. In fact, the less capable he is, the more I'm interested. Yeah. But no, I like needed to do some more work on this Kwesi piece.
That's funny. Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal. Yeah, let's get into a little bit of shilling and some thank yous. Before we do the shilling, for those who missed last episode, we did announce that we have one more season of Norse Code that will be coming at you. We've got some plans that are coming up here in the next little while as to what post Norse Code life will look like. That's a sentence. I should not be paid to talk, but we'll be figuring that out as we go, and we've got some plans for the Patreon people. But I just wanted to say thank you. Some of the really nice messages that were sent, the gigantic Reddit thread, and a number of posts that were both in the Discord and on social media. I just wanted to say thank you. We've been doing this show a long time, and it's been. There are better seasons and there are worse seasons, but seeing some of the messages there about how long people have been listening, or just like happiness that like how often we get to post, or you've been arguing with a reef online for 14 years and what are you going to do now, sort of thing. Like, I get it, but I wanted to say thank you because those messages meant a lot. That was really cool, and we really appreciated that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add on to that. I mean, I spent a surprising amount of time going over some of the messages that we received. I mean, honestly, I was going over them actually with the person I'm seeing now, and I was like, what is going on? And they're like, no, people like your work. It was so difficult for me to like fully capture how impactful some of you have talked about the show being, and it's. I mean, it's both like, it gives you a lot of pride and it also like humbles you a little bit. I don't know. It's really difficult to describe having an impact on people. Like hearing about listeners who have listened to the show for over 10 years and expressing genuine sadness at the prospect of not having the show anymore is really, really touching. So I really appreciate that. It means a lot knowing that like it's possible to like impact people's lives like that.
I enjoyed the one guy on Reddit who posted never listened to it, and I think I had commented neither have I or something like that, or neither has a reef. I was like, yeah, this is good.
You're not alone, buddy.
Yep. I gotta tell you,
I'm on it. And I don't know what's happening on it. So.
Yeah, well, a reef. I mean, if Reef would listen, he'd know what he said, but. That's just not going to happen. So anyway, just wanted to thank you guys. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can go over to patreon.com/norsecode for $3.50 a month or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to the Discord, bonus episodes, all of that. I will put a new bonus episode out at some point here in the next 2 weeks, probably. We'll see. We'll see level of sobriety versus what we end up talking about. I've got plans for the next episode, so we'll see what we can get out of that. But again, patreon.com/norsecode. You can also go to paypal.me/norsecode as well for a one-time donation. This is all muscle memory, by the way. Or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com for any number of wonderful pieces of Norse Code merchandise, including the Hell League merch, which you should get because it looks awesome. Let's get into the show itself. And again, apologies for the potential slurring and potential Southern accent that I developed the first day of the injury when they proceeded to pump me full of Toradol.
Well, I mean, the Vikings were attempting to sign Aaron Rodgers, who is in a very similar situation as you, having suddenly developed a Southern accent. So it's only appropriate that on the conclusion of their failed endeavor to potentially sign Aaron Rodgers, you adopt the Southern accent we were missing.
Exactly. I think the message I sent to you after the injury happened, after I got into the hospital, I was like, wait, don't buy any plane tickets yet. I can't walk anymore. I got taken by the ambulance from my home in a blizzard to the hospital. And, I'm full of so much Toradol. I developed the Aaron Rodgers Southern accent from that Bears game. So I'm doing my best. All right, show itself. Let's get into it. Kwesi was fired. GM for the Vikings has been fired. This is big news, not just because it's the general manager, because it's later in the offseason stuff. This usually happens a lot earlier. For me, and I expressed this thought earlier, but to me, Occam's razor would suggest that it's one of two things happened. Either A, the people who are writing the checks here are not pleased about the fact that two potential Vikings quarterbacks are playing each other in the Super Bowl this year, or more likely, this has much to do with the Brian Flores extension.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of kind of the postmortems that we're seeing, which of course, like I mentioned, I'll be writing one as well, have been about why Kwesi in general would be fired, right? Or why the team decided generally to fire him, which is like not that much of a mystery. I'll go over it in extensive detail, but like that's not a mystery, right? Like he was bad at drafting. Like we know that, right? The Viking season didn't go the way that the Vikings wanted it to, and they weren't going to fire the head coach, and personnel was a big reason why. So it makes sense to get rid of the none of that's the interesting element. The interesting element was like, what's the official date of the firing? January 30th, January 29th? It happened late January as opposed to at the end of the season. We had a whole month of general managers getting hired across the league, all of these interesting and exciting candidates, going through interviews and stuff like that. And the Vikings didn't participate in any of that, despite getting rid eventually of their general manager. So the question is the timing. That's what needs the explanation. And a lot of the discussions that we've seen about it spend much more time, which I will be doing, spending much more time on why generally he would be fired and not why the timing is so interesting. And so there's two essential, I think, like you mentioned, James, two essential answers that kind of make the most sense here. One, the fact that both Drake May and Sam Darnold are in the Super Bowl, both potentially acquirable by the Vikings, right? Acquirable or retainable, right? However you want to put it. That stings a little bit. And I've seen a lot of people kind of dismiss this one. And while I ultimately have come down to the side of that not being the reason, I don't think the idea that, hey, that's kind of a dumb reason is enough of a reason for you to say that that's not true. Because, like, you got to understand, like, I'm not saying, like, you got to read through a bunch of emails that have been released this week. You got to understand billionaires are not necessarily the brightest bulbs or not necessarily unemotional. They can be pretty impulsive.
Yeah,
and
subtlety is something that can be lacking.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. And so when you look at like the decisions that NFL owners have made over the years, right, a lot of them can be tied to personal politics or impulsivity or emotions that don't really kind of track with, coolly, calmly, collectively making a decision that makes the most sense from like kind of a process perspective. Right. So I don't want to dismiss like a billionaire being personally insulted by the nature of this upcoming Super Bowl, right? That makes sense. But I think ultimately it does come down to some degree of the Brian Flores extension. Now, I'm not saying none of the reporters have talked about this. Now, one of the reporters, I believe, actually, I like wrote down all the quotes. But one of the reporters, let's take a look, at least one, Kevin Seifert over at ESPN brought up Brian Flores, right? And in his piece over at ESPN, apparently, according to his sources, right, when asked last month if he wanted to remain with the Vikings, Flores noted to the Vikings that he loved working for the Wilfs and with O'Connell and loved living in Minnesota, but he did not mention Adofo-Mensah. Now, I feel like that actually shouldn't matter, right? Like, generally speaking, that's kind of whatever. But two things. One, someone told Kevin Seifert that, right? So he would have to think that was meaningful for whatever reason in telling him that, right? Like, you forget to mention someone, or like you primarily are talking about the people that you work with or your boss, right? But you don't mention one of the other guys who works with you. That's usually whatever, but there's a reason someone told Kevin Seifert that, and that's because there's some import, some meaning to not bringing up Adofo-Mensah. The second thing is that one of the reasons that the Vikings had extended negotiations with Brian Flores, and this part is not like sourced reporting, this is just obvious, is that they couldn't come to terms, which means it wasn't about just money, right? That's pretty clear. Brian Flores' contract was coming up. He had, defensive coordinator interviews with other teams, and that would allow him to dictate terms beyond money. Now, my understanding is that it's very likely the case that Brian Flores is the highest or second highest paid coordinator in the league right now. At the time that Chip Kelly was fired from the Raiders, he was getting paid $6 million a year, and he was the highest paid coordinator in the league. Vic Fangio gets paid $4.5 million a year. I believe he's the highest paid defensive coordinator in the league, or he was at the beginning of January. So my guess is that's where Brian Flores is getting paid. Now, I think he could get that anywhere that he would have interviewed for a defensive coordinator job. So he would have wanted probably something else. There's probably a bunch of things that you could do, right? One of them could be get a new GM. That could be a condition of you signing, and they wanted to keep him so much. That's what they did. I don't think that's actually it. I think that that's like a little bit too direct and power politic-y and like kind of gross or whatever. But that could be it. Another one could be that he wanted player control. Now, I believe there's a strong likelihood that Kevin O'Connell might have some degree of control over the offensive players that they acquire. Now, with Brian Flores coming in, or sorry, not coming in, but re-signing to potentially new terms, it could be the case that Brian Flores has defensive control, or at least defensive control in a world where Kwesi's not the general manager. What does that leave Kwesi with? Special teamers? Those decisions kind of make themselves most of the time. So in some sense, and especially because, Rob Brzezinski does a lot of the contract, he does all the contracts, and based off of like stuff like Matthew Coller's reporting on this, also seems to have a hand in a lot of their trades. So what does Kwesi do? And I think kind of this idea that he would take a backseat, all speculation, right? But I think that this idea that he could take a backseat may have kind of motivated this, right? So Brian Flores gets hired. There are some extensive conversations between Kwesi and the ownership about what his role is in this environment. And the ownership kind of tells him, again, I'm speculating, this is not reporting. The ownership kind of tells him, hey, this is kind of the deal. This is, this guy's handling, the contracts. Player acquisition is being handled by the coaches here. And, you have to accept that or you have to walk. And maybe it could be the case that that was what they said and he decided not to accept that. I can't tell you that that's what happened because I don't know. But the timing to me suggests that something like this may have happened, especially because I don't think it was an explicit power politics play or anything like that. The fact that, Adofo-Mensah has not done a ton to, boost the team's capabilities, especially in this last offseason where all the players that they acquired got injured or didn't play up to their level. Javon Hargrave got benched. Will Fries didn't play up to the level that you wanted. Ryan Kelly got injured 3 times, so on and so forth, right? That clearly probably plays a role, but like the timing is the most interesting element here. And the other thing that happened at the same time, aside from the Super Bowl, obviously, or learning who the participants in the Super Bowl would be, is the Brian Flores re-signing. So that seems kind of likely from a timing perspective. That's kind of my take on it. We can talk more about kind of some of the ways that we evaluate general managers and how we know that Kwesi is not a very good GM and stuff like that. But I think that's kind of the best way to look at it, is to think of it in terms of, the Vikings were negotiating with a very prominent defensive coordinator potential hire, right, or rehire, and suddenly they let go of a member of the front office. I don't know. Seems kind of cut and dry to me.
I guess the question on that then, based on what you've said, is whether or not, if we have somebody separate kind of for offense and somebody separate for defense, for decisions, do we end up hiring somebody, or is there like a specific type of person that we would end up hiring for GM?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, right? Like it depends on a couple of things, right? So again, we're working off of a hypothetical already, but that would not be appealing for a lot of general managers to be in that spot, because you are essentially hiring a figurehead who could become a scapegoat, which Matthew Collar in his Purple Insider piece essentially says Kwesi was a scapegoat. And Kevin Seifert's piece kind of suggests like kind of easy to fire the guy who was the unusual hire at GM more than it is the coach that everybody likes, right? So you're hiring someone to fulfill that role without the ability to kind of control outcomes or demonstrate their value. So you might be limited from being able to do that kind of thing, right? So the Vikings or with the Wilfs were asked, would you consider Rob Brzezinski? So Rob Brzezinski's the cap guy who is now in charge of operations until the end of the draft. Would you consider him to be a full-time general manager? And they didn't answer that question. So he's obviously a candidate. I don't know if he wants that. I suspect if he wanted that, he'd already be a general manager somewhere. He's been in that role forever. He's executed that role really outstandingly well. I would think that if that's something he wanted with the Vikings or somewhere else, that he would have that he would have at least taken an interview for one of those roles. So I doubt that that's what he wants to do, but that's a possibility. The other thing is that you could bring someone in, and it could be the case that Flores and or O'Connell would only kind of want to exercise that kind of control or authority in a world where Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is the general manager. So a new general manager could come in, renegotiate the terms of all three of their contracts, including the incoming general manager's contract, to kind of reset, right? And that would be something that you would have to do in a world where that hypothetical is the case. You're always going to find somebody, right? Like it's a well-paying position. It's, you get to put general manager in front of you, all of that. You're always going to find somebody, but the quality of person that you're going to be able to find is probably a little bit lower. A, if you're hiring in May, but B, if you're kind of limiting the capability of that person, because somebody who is probably a hot prospect in theory, because they're very good at being a general manager, probably wouldn't want to take on that role and probably would wait until a better opportunity comes. So I do think that if that were the case, that would inhibit hiring. But it could be the case that those kind of like roster decision, roster control things were conditioned upon whether or not Kwesi was there. So it is possible that actually plays no role at all. But I think that that's something to think about, like the quality of and also how much does the quality of that general manager matter if they're not going to be making those kinds of decisions? I don't know.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning, despite the absurdity of some of the rumors that have come out about the potential trade stuff, that there could have been a move on from JJ McCarthy last year. I hate when people put out these rumor articles, because a lot of it's fun. Like a lot of it's like rats leaving the ship and the Zimmer thing. And we talked about this multiple times this year. And usually this stuff happens in early January. But like you get to the point with reading some of these rumors where it's like they were going to trade McCarthy to the Raiders before he'd actually had a chance to play, so we wouldn't know whether or not he was good or not. So we're basically selling him as high as we can, and then in order to like try to keep Darnold. But if you do that, then like you can't afford a number of the other things that you wanted to do that year. So there's a ton of like interesting little rumors that have come out about this about the decision here. But all in all, it's just kind of an odd timing. But if you place it in the framing of the Flores extension, it at least makes some form of sense.
Yeah. The rumors are so bizarre, right? We're seeing a bunch of reports come out. I think some people are just kind of saying stuff without like being checked, right? But like we're seeing a bunch of reports come out that are somewhat reminiscent of like, the Bills, how they just treated Keon Coleman. There's a difference here, of course. The owner just said it at a press conference, like, wow, what a screw up that guy was. He's like still on the roster. What are you doing? But it does seem like there's like a lot of like, hey, this JJ stuff is like not my fault. So I've seen reporting and or rumors that Kevin O'Connell, maybe he likes McCarthy, but he didn't think he was ready yet, and so he wanted a better option at quarterback. And Kwesi Adofo-Mensah said no when he kind of forced him into this situation. And there are other rumors that O'Connell wanted to trade McCarthy, and like you mentioned, like the Raiders. I don't know.
Timing of that wouldn't have made much sense either.
No,
because they got Geno Smith early last offseason.
None of it really tracks. I don't really understand. But yeah, I think that we have to be pretty careful about the reporting that we're trusting about kind of who made what decisions and how those decisions were made in light of this. And it doesn't even have to be Kevin O'Connell doing this kind of. It could be Kevin O'Connell's agent being like, "Hey, you know what I heard," right? Like it could just be stuff like that. Where any of these bad decisions are on Kwesi and any of the good decisions are on O'Connell, right? That like, well, actually O'Connell wanted to keep Darnold, right? Well, it's like, I'm sure he did, but he doesn't deal with, who cares? Like that he wanted, like all the coaches want to keep all the players that are good, right? Like I'm sure, Mike Zimmer wanted to keep Xavier Rhodes, right? But like Spielman ultimately had to make a decision and he did, and Rhodes was gone. And that was probably a good thing, right? Like it's really difficult to kind of parse all of this out in a way that kind of gives us a good view of what was happening inside the organization. And it's kind of getting layered on top of some of the reporting that we're getting from like Diana Rossini and Adam Schefter, and I think Ian Rappaport, that like this was a long time coming and there was tension in the organization, and some of it is seemingly substantiated, right? So the local beat has been reporting that one of the issues with Adofo-Mensah is that he did not interface very well with the coaches. He didn't do a very good job of kind of being available, right? He's kind of insular, right? And that kind of rubbed the coaches the wrong way. And then on top of that, if you're not very good at your job while you're also insular, like that part seems to be kind of legitimate. But then you get this, like Rossini is still kind of obsessed with the Rodgers story, right? And so I guess multiple sources inside the building continue to tell Rossini that Rodgers is interested in signing a below market deal with the Vikings, which like, why is that on the list of things that we're firing this guy for?
Yeah. Also,
who cares?
If anybody has lost their journalistic shine over the past year, as far as Vikings reporting or even like NFL reporting, she has to be near the top of the list. Like it's
right,
it's
like
bad.
Yeah. So I mean, it seems like what probably happened is, again, speculation, not reporting, is that the Vikings were discussing all their quarterback options and Rodgers came up, and at some point Rodgers had indicated to the Vikings organization that he was interested. So he's like, his name was thrown around, and then that gets, I don't know. But either way, yeah. So it went, and what's on top of that, like we get into some of the other decisions, which again don't explain the timing, like the inability to retain Daniel Jones. And yeah, obviously it would have been nice to retain Daniel Jones, but like, what evidence did the Vikings have that O'Connell's magic extended to this guy that was on the practice squad for 6 weeks? Right?
Combined with that, with the fact that he knew he was going to be in a situation where the existing structure wanted their quarterback that they just drafted to start. He didn't
like and this is what's really interesting, is that the reporting, when you kind of tease out all of the implications of the reporting, they end up contradicting each other, right? Because if you're blaming, let's say you're on the coaching staff, let's say you're Josh McCown and you're leaking to Diana Rossini. I'm not saying that's who it is. I have no idea, right? But let's say you're doing that. You're reporting that the Vikings could have retained Daniel Jones, right? And they just had to offer him a better deal. That would suggest that Daniel Jones would have legitimately thought he would have had a chance to compete, which contradicts some of the other reporting that Rossini has, that the Vikings were hell-bent on starting McCarthy. So like, which is it? What, or do we actually think that there was a way to retain Daniel Jones given the incentives that were in place, the ability, or like if the Vikings didn't want to start McCarthy, what's with all this other reporting that O'Connell wanted to bring in other quarterbacks and Kwesi refused, right? I don't really understand the way all of this reporting, hashes itself out in ways that are kind of logically consistent or coherent. There's enough reasons to get rid of Adofo-Mensah. The piling on of additional reasons, like the inability to retain Daniel Jones, the inability to retain Sam Darnold, the Adam Thielen stuff. Matthew Collar reported that in attempting to trade for Adam Thielen, Adofo-Mensah kind of balked at the price because the Panthers thought hey, this guy was pretty productive for last year, so we're not going to give him. And Brzezinski intervened in the trade and traded for him. Well, that kind of makes Adofo-Mensah look kind of good, right? And I think Collar is communicating that a little bit. He's communicating that there was already distrust of Adofo-Mensah and that they were overriding him and doing stuff behind his back. In this case, it didn't work out, right? But it sounds like some of the stuff that they disliked them for is stuff that he was right about. I don't know. He didn't sign Aaron Rodgers. Oh no. Rodgers probably would have played quarterback better than whatever we saw this year, and that might have led the Vikings to the playoffs. But for what? He wasn't good, right? Is the record that meaningfully better? They're not going to win a playoff game, so who cares, right? But yeah, I don't know. The fact that he gave first of all, this kind of puts this into a new light, right? So they were supposed to do the end of season presser on the Monday following the Vikings last game, and they pushed it to the following week, right? And so we were all like, why would they do that? What's kind of the idea behind it? Maybe they'll announce they've re-signed Flores, and so that'll be part of that presser, or they'll have gotten rid of either Matt Daniels, the special teams coordinator, or Josh McCown, the quarterbacks coach, and they'll have replaced them. And so the presser will be kind of wrapped in. No, none of that. Adofo-Mensah goes out. He talks about all of this stuff. He's like, in hindsight, obviously it would have been nice to have Darnold, but we kind of trust our process. And you wake up thinking what would the season look like? Or you stay up in bed, you think, what would the season have looked like? But you have to trust the process that you have. And so he has that presser. And then he goes to the Senior Bowl. He's there at the Senior Bowl with scouts, scouting players. And then he gets fired on the way, on his day off. He got fired on his day off.
How do you get fired on your day off?
That's weird. That's so weird. Why was it like that? Why did they let him go to the Senior Bowl?
Can you imagine trying to get all of your stuff get comped again, covered by your employer when you got fired at the Senior Bowl? I've got these 17 meals. I got a car rental.
Yeah, if he didn't have a card connected directly to a Vikings account and he's relying on a reimbursement process, that's going to be...
he found out in the morning when he was getting Dunkin'. The card didn't work.
The car got canceled. Hey, well, it's like the Hard Knocks where the Jets player's trying to get into the building and his card doesn't work.
Yep, exactly.
It's hey man, just trying to get Starbucks. What?
Well, we've certainly talked about the second bit of news quite a bit already, but Brian Flores is returning. Thank you to racism for allowing us to continue to keep our
the episode title.
No. But
make
Brian
me tweet
Flores
that out.
is our quarterback. What was that?
Is you going to make me tweet out the episode title, episode 599.5? Thank you to racism.
That's from sea to shining sea. Yes. Brian Flores is returning, and we had kind of said that this it seemed like the most likely candidate as to what was going to end up happening. But Brian Flores returns.
Yeah, and I didn't anticipate that the Steelers and the Ravens would both have openings. So, that did change my understanding of the likelihood that he'd be head coach somewhere. But Mike McCarthy, man, what?
There were some real choices that were made this offseason.
Yeah, they went with Mike McCarthy instead of Brian Flores, which is their prerogative. Of course, they're allowed to do that. And yeah, Brian Flores didn't have a ton of other places he could go. I've speculated that he's probably only going to go to a place that has a reputation of good ownership. So had the Giants not already been excluded because of how they screwed him, the Giants would have been excluded. The Cardinals would have been excluded and so on. Right. And the Dolphins for obvious reasons. Right. But in addition,
somebody was trying to point out how the Dolphins were a dark horse in this, and I went, boy, that is, yeah, exactly. It's like, no.
First of all, the terms to use given his specifics, but
between that and Cowboys fans spending the last month of the season going, we're getting Flores. No, you're not.
No,
you're not getting him as a defensive coordinator. Why would he do that?
So while that was the most likely scenario, I thought at the end of the season that the Vikings would retain him. It got a tiny bit dicey in the middle there, but ultimately that's what played out. The Vikings retained him as defensive coordinator. Again, for seemingly a very high dollar value relative to what coordinators get paid, which is awesome. Happy for him. Not my money. I don't care. Right. I am particularly enthused by that fact, given that Daronte Jones was just hired by the Washington Commanders to be their defensive coordinator. He would have been the replacement, essentially, for Brian Flores. My understanding is if he didn't sign with the team. And my concern is that it is non-replicable. That you can't just get someone who worked with Brian Flores to run the Brian Flores scheme. I think it is a very uniquely kind of what he does. And he's the one that figures out how to make it work and why it works in the way it does and how to take advantage of particular players and their unique skill sets that maybe those players wouldn't be as good in other systems, right? Andrew Van Ginkel is a great example. He was pretty fine with the Dolphins, but he's been outstanding with the Vikings, right? That kind of stuff. Josh Metellus, who wasn't that great this last year, but the year before was fantastic, given that he had two safeties on top that were effective as opposed to this year. I don't know that you'd find a place for him to work in another system, right? And I don't think that you could have this kind of defense work. Now, it is interesting that Brian Flores continues to be plagued by the same kind of problems. I don't know, the rumors of problems that are following him around. I say rumors, but Mike Pettin just went on a podcast and said it, right? But the Vikings safety coach left to coach at Cal, I think. Daronte Jones is gone. There's another departure. Mike Pettin moved from the defensive side of the ball to the offensive side of the ball and then left and then got on the podcast and was like, hey, if I speak, I'll be in trouble. About Brian Flores. Sounds like he's kind of tough to work with. So that'll be a story to kind of keep in mind because, Mike Zimmer was a really good defensive mind and a really great defensive play caller for a long time for the Vikings. And then it kind of broke down. And part of the reason it kind of broke down is that he's kind of hard to work with, right? So, sure. I'm pretty happy about this. I think he's a top three Brian Flores is a top three defensive mind in the NFL right now. But there's a risk profile associated with it. I'm kind of curious to see what it will look like if the Vikings ever decide to get good cornerbacks. That would be so cool. To see.
Allowed? I don't know if that's allowed.
I certainly there's some workaround in the rules, some loophole that would allow you to acquire good corners. I'm doing Byron Murphy dirty here. He's good, but give him some help, man. He's going to lose help because he's not going to have Harrison Smith. Probably, I guess we technically don't know that. He's not going to have Harrison Smith. So it's Theo Jackson back there. He was already benched. We know he's not good. So, that'd be kind of cool if you got a cornerback to work with Byron Murphy.
Yeah.
But, failing that, maybe a safety or three. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what that'll look like if the Vikings do invest more resources from a draft perspective, especially, but invest more resources at the back end of that defense, maybe free up the resources they've invested on the front end of that defense. I don't know, but truly an interesting, unique defensive mind that at the very least gives like these X's and O's people, like Match Quarters, who I love to follow, and Brett Coleman and stuff like that, a ton of content, because Brian Flores just does stuff differently. And I like consuming that kind of content. So at the very least, there's that. But also, I mean, without Brian Flores, I mean, the Vikings are like a 3-win team, right? Maybe.
Yeah, that defense makes it so that when the offense is being terrible, all they need is 14 points to win.
Yeah.
As it turns out, that's very important. So we talked a lot over the last couple episodes about Brian Flores and his potential locations that he could go to. We don't need to rehash all of that. If you'd like to listen more, let me tell you about Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts aggregated. Check them out there. But we've talked a lot about it, so we're going to go to a very quick mailbag in our episode 599.5. This is the epilogue. This is the epilogue for the 2025 season. Blurs and epilogues. So Francis Ford Copium asks, for Reefs, only if McCarthy is the Steelers' next head coach corner, who has milked their Super Bowl experience to more mediocrity, Jeff Fisher or Mike McCarthy?
Oh, Jeff Fisher. That's not close.
But Jeff Fisher obviously lost his Super Bowl and lasted forever. But McCarthy won his with a top 5 quarterback of all time who openly hated his play calling and already came back and failed with the Cowboys.
Okay, I see the case that you're making. I respect it. That was I gotta say kind of harsh, a little harsh what you just said. I'm gonna take a look real quick at because Jeff Fisher did have Pro Bowl quarterback Jared Goff on his team. AFC champions, that's it. So
I mean, all you need are 1 or 2 Pro Bowl quarterbacks on your team, and you should be able to like not be fired.
Kevin Stefanski's listening and stewing. Pro Bowl quarterback? Is that what they said?
He just hit the console, the center console of the car.
Okay. Mike McCarthy is an uninspiring choice, but like with the Cowboys, the 3 middle seasons, he went 12-5, all 3 of those seasons, right? Again, Dak Prescott's a pretty good quarterback, so it's like not quite the same. But like, you know, he gets hired, they go 6-10. It's your first year as a coach, so like you always get like a little bit of leeway. Then you go 12-5, 12-5, 12-5, and then 7-10, right? Which like that's your failing season. That's the season that got you fired. That's like not too bad. Jeff Fisher's like good years in the final years of his career were 7-9, right? He goes 8-8 in 2009, and he goes 6-10, 7-8-1, 7-9, 6-10, 7-9, 4-9. He gets fired. Obviously, he would have won those final 3 games, as is law. But these are not to me comparable, right? I understand that Mike McCarthy had a better roster to like work with, but I mean, look at the 2025 Dallas Cowboys. Like, you know, this is Jeff Fisher leaving and the Rams immediately becoming Super Bowl powerhouses versus Mike McCarthy leaving and the Cowboys getting somehow even more embarrassing than they were before. I don't know. It feels like, you know, also like I understand like this, like you got blessed with like an all pro, like all time quarterback. I feel like he gets some credit for Aaron Rodgers' development. Like, yeah, Aaron Rodgers hates him. Who doesn't he hate? Like, yeah. Like the only people he doesn't hate are like actually sycophants, right? Like Nathaniel Hackett, who I believe just got hired by the Dolphins ? For some reason. But like, you know, Mike McCarthy was like a big part of developing Aaron Rodgers, and then depending, like he kind of set up like LaFleur for some success. I don't know. I agree that he's an uninspiring hire, and I don't love it. On paper, this is actually a fantastic hire, which is not something you could ever say about Jeff Fisher. Like, I don't know how else to put it. He went like 7 straight seasons with a losing record. It's crazy that he actually kept his job.
He became a meme, and then when he became the meme, he like doubled down on it.
Yeah.
And like retained his, it was amazing. We're not staying on topic very long. We're already off the rails because we only got a couple of questions here.
Great.
Mad Max Brosmer asks, for Arif's Funding Terrorism Corner, I, like many others, get my regular Vikings news and analysis through podcasts because I don't have much time in my busy life for written media, and instead listen to podcasts while driving, doing work, chores, etc. As a result, with Norse Code ending, I will need to find a new Vikings podcast to listen to. A quick internet search suggests checking out shows on the Locked On Network, which are hosted by enemy of Norse Code and known terrorist Luke Braun. Given that Luke's shows are ad-supported, Arif's decision to end Norse Code will directly result in more people listening to Luke Braun's shows, funneling more money into his pockets. Therefore, my question is, does Arif have any remorse whatsoever regarding him directly funding terrorism through his choice to end the show?
I think we're playing a lot with the word directly here, right?
Still a lot of heavy lifting here.
That's not what that word means. Unfortunately, you, as my therapist tells me, I can't hold myself responsible for the decisions other people make. And if you decide to listen to a show hosted by a known terrorist, that's on you, man. That's not my fault. Like you need to kind of break free of these chains. You could listen to Matthew Collar's podcast or Andrew Kramer's podcast or Score North. I don't know do we have overlap with the Score North audience? It feels like no, but like
not a ton.
Probably, right? Okay.
There is some.
Yeah. There's a lot of other podcasts out there that are not hosted by known terrorist Luke Braun. You make that choice. I don't know, like when your local bookstore shuts down, do you get mad at them for making you go to Amazon? If you do, that I think says a lot more about you than it does the bookstore.
Let's go to our next question, which is from Football's Misandrous Niche, who asks, for Arif's damn hippies corner, why couldn't you just get coffee in Vermont? Even though those woke bastard gun maniacs may have banned you from drinking hideous taurine nightmare juice, caffeine was surely quite accessible in the form of that delicious hot brown.
I did get coffee. It's just not very efficient. It's like a lot of liquid to get a similar amount of caffeine. I think I was drinking coffee during that moment in the clip show where that came up when I did that. Like I did have coffee. It's just like you got to go through so much more to get the same amount of caffeine, and then like you have to go to the bathroom. It's just not great. Plus, like I love coffee, but it is like a harder sip. It's like a more difficult sip than an energy drink, right? Because it's just like it's stronger, it's bitter. That's the idea, right? And if you're adding stuff to it, like milk, you're diluting it. So that accelerates the caffeine density problem here. So yeah, I was having caffeine, but like less of it because that's how that works.
Let's go to Sean Bolsharif, who asks, we always heard about it, but what was Kwesi cooking? A steak dinner? A souffle? Perhaps a burnt tater tot casserole? That's a hot dish, my friend. How dare you?
Yeah, come on, man. Also, definitely a souffle, but like the idea that someone cooking a souffle is the same as someone successfully cooking a souffle. Those are different things. He opened the oven, it collapsed. That's it. It's over. Also, souffles are actually a lot easier than the reputation suggests, but like you got to let it cool down slowly in the oven with the oven door closed. Otherwise, it will collapse. And he opened the oven door. Come on.
Nope, you don't want that, and you don't want a soggy bottom. These are the two things I know. Let's go to a second jet has hit Drew Bledsoe, who asks, for James's medical health corner, do you think you have more drugs and painkillers pumping through you than Carson Wentz did after he exploded his shoulder? It's very possible. Yes, it is very, very possible.
Are you making like the same faces as he was making?
I try not to. Well, here's the thing. I haven't shaved since I've been in here. So like I've got the beard too. So it's not good. There's no part of this look is good. So like I might be accidentally making the doofy faces. Let's go to the Village Yakmonger, who asks, what other events did Norse Code orchestrate from the shadows? And what will Kevin O'Connell be fired for mid-season?
Wait, are we being blamed for Kwesi's firing?
I mean, because it's the last season, we're trying to spice it up. Maybe.
Sure. I just feel like we would have done it at a moment where we didn't have to record an emergency episode to cover. Like we would have naturally been in the cadence of Norse Code.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be in the hospital.
Literally. I mean, I don't know, man. Seeing the way like showrunners have done, like Stranger Things and Game of Thrones, like maybe we got one of those showrunners that just doesn't have any sense of timing.
Yeah, that. Or it's something else. Gavin O'Connell is going to be fired for rebroadcasting without consent of the National Football League. Longing for crippled Carson Wentz asks, is the fix in? Did Norse Code call in a favor to increase the spice level of the final season? Obviously.
Of course.
Yeah, this is canon.
Yeah, the favor that we have with the Wilfs. Yeah.
Yeah, that. We'll ignore any Wilf mention in the documents that came out on Friday. We're not ready to talk about that. The gaming nerd, I guess he wanted to buy a house.
Yeah, it was just like buying a house. Like it's just a billionaire buying a house from a billionaire, whatever.
Yeah. The gaming nerd asks, for Arif's and James's food corner, I was recently told that you should only get into sourdough making if you are ready to have bread as a pet. How true is this comparison? What kind of bread races are there? And are they similar to bee races?
I would see a sourdough starter race. I would watch that for sure.
I don't even. My brain just stopped. Wow.
Well, it's like I don't know if you're familiar with boxcar racing, or pine derby racing.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Who's to say if either of us have experience with that? But with the ramp,
famously,
with the ramp, you could have the sourdough starters kind of just like roll down, probably like an olive oil lined.
I mean, I'm pretty confident he's not referring to that type of racing, but you do you.
No, that's the only way I will choose to interpret this.
Okay. Well, let's go to bookmarked Better Be.
Better Be, what the?
For James's, the agricultural hall is for agricultural music corner. What is the worst music request you ever got as a DJ? I mean, I nearly got decapitated with a chair for the YMCA thing, but there was a lawsuit put in on one of my dances because I refused to play Family Tradition by Hank Williams Jr. The person who paid the bill said they didn't want to hear the song, and everyone came up trying to play it. And then after the fact, the person who paid the check sued us because people were complaining about the fact that we never played the song. and I had to I take meticulous notes while DJing, saying, "Hey, no, I asked it this time, and this time," and every time it was no. So, yeah, that's the song for me.
That's great. I obviously am not familiar with the world of wedding DJing, but I wouldn't have expected the habit of taking notes to save you in a lawsuit.
Oh God, everyone's hammered.
Yeah, no, it makes sense in retrospect. It just wouldn't have occurred. Is this a normal practice for wedding DJs, or is this something that they all learn the hard way?
It's one they should pick up. And when I was training people, I was trying to trying to get them to do it to the extent that I did. And I don't know that they did. I still have my DJ notes for some reason.
Sure.
But it's absolutely something that they should do. On the first night that I would take prospective DJs out, and when I was training them, I'd be like, look, notice how everyone's hammered right now? Yeah. This is why writing stuff down is your friend. Let's wrap this up. Skimbleshanks asks, is Arif cheering for the Seahawks in the Super Bowl? And if so, wouldn't that make him a Seahawks fan? Conversely, if he's cheering for the Patriots, why is he supporting Robert Kraft and, by proxy, Jeffrey Epstein?
Okay. First of all, none of you believe that cheering for a team means supporting the owners. Otherwise, and I hate to say it, but this is the comparison you're setting up, Skimbleshanks. Otherwise, you would all be Packers fans. Right? Like, there's no other way around it. Like the Wilfs might be kind of like the least objectionable billionaire owners. As far as I can tell, they are, right? But like, be serious. This has nothing to do with supporting the owners. Second, I'm not cheering for the Seahawks. I'm cheering for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, actually that.
Yeah.
Somebody had, I think there was some Reddit post about, people were like complaining about Sam Darnold being on the Seahawks and like how we set the franchise back 10 years. And I think I made the comment that like, look, just because your ex is having some success does not mean you two would still be happy. Like, just deal. just deal with this. Finally, from Skimble Shanks, is Eli Manning making the Hall of Fame worth it if it gives him one final victory over Bill Belichick?
I'm so glad I didn't read these beforehand.
I love that. I needed
so
to
good.
include it. I'm proud of myself for being able to say that whole thing without giggling.
That's so good. I will add this before we end the show. Just kind of want to talk about the Bill Belichick thing real quick. First of all, it sounds like Eli Manning is not making the Hall of Fame. Someone leaked that, which is like weird. Or maybe we found all the fun and he wasn't one of them. I don't care. He's not making the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. Fantastic. Or whatever. Second, the Bill Belichick thing is crazy because it is more of a systemic issue than it is like a voters issue. I don't know if you read the piece from the Kansas City Star writer. I believe there's like one other piece floating around out there about why they didn't vote for Belichick. But like the system is set up in such a crazy bonkers way that like Bill Belichick is competing directly with Ken Anderson for some reason. And that a vote for one might be a vote taking away from the other. And so what happens is you've got 5 potential people that are put up for a vote by this committee. One of them is a coach. One of them is a contributor, which is often an owner. And 3 of them are senior candidates, basically second chancers, right? And so if you're a voter who thinks that that Bill Belichick is definitely getting in, that it kind of makes sense for you to vote for Ken Anderson and L.C. Greenwood, and I forget who the other one is, instead, because you're like, well, I want to get as many of these deserving candidates in as possible. So I'm going to vote, because you only get 3 votes. So you have 5, you only get to vote for 3 of these 5 in non-competing categories. And you're like, well, everyone's going to vote for Bill Belichick, so I'm going to vote for Ken Anderson because I think he should go in. And it's this kind of strategic voting that screws up a lot. It's screwed up the MVP in the past. I think it still screws up the MVP because you have to vote for MVP and Offensive Player of the Year at the same time, and so a vote for one means you can't. But it sucks. I hate it. But like, that's what happened. Is that there's a combination of 2 things. One, that they're all competing with each other. You can only vote for 3 of the 5. 2, you have to hit like an 80% threshold to be let in. Why? Why? That's crazy. So yeah, that's stupid. The whole thing is stupid. They got to fix that. But that's why. Sorry, that's crazy to me. So that's really what happened. Obviously, Bill Belichick should go in. Obviously, this doesn't prevent him from going in. This just prevents him from being a first ballot guy, which also seems to be kind of lost in this conversation. It's also weird that he is eligible right away. I don't think he should be, but like, whatever. Now that he is, you probably should have voted for him. But yeah, it's stupid. Anyway, Eli Manning, please don't be allowed. We already have enough quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame. We got to be real selective going forward about that position.
Anyway, eat at Arby's. Yeah, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you have enjoyed this this little bit of an epilogue. We will be back soon with a proper episode 600 where I am not higher than Dusty, where I am not the highest person on the podcast. Arif, what do you have to plug?
Over at Wide Left, we got some college all-star game recaps. I've got a piece on Kwesi Adofo-Mensah coming out soon. There's a bunch of stuff. We've got the gay Olympics stuff that Ethan is writing. He's tracking all of the queer athletes that are competing in the Olympics. and treating them like they're their own country and doing like medal counts and highlighting some of the most interesting stories along the way. And we've got some stuff about chip tracking at all-star practices and how useful that might be. Bunch of stuff over at Wide Left. I'm going to have the Adofo-Mensah piece out soon as well. And Matt Fries is going to finish. I stumbled on the pronunciation of his last name. Is going to finish the third part of his 3-part plan on the Vikings offseason plan, which is changing now, right, without Kwesi, but honestly shouldn't in terms of the mechanics of it. So a lot of stuff coming up at Wide Left. We're publishing a ton more at the end of the season than we typically do. So I invite people to head over.
Well, that's it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Hopefully my drugged out persona didn't cause too many problems for you. So, and we managed not to curse as far as I know. So good for us.
Hell yeah.
We're fucked either way. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember, what is our sign off anyway? There we go. You never want to go double Ngakwe. And we'll be back soon.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.